You press the pedal on an electric car, certainly in my Ioniq, woof, you're gone. Smoking it. It's kind of the odd thing to say when you're a boomer, but you know, we're all kids at heart. So here we go. It's yet another podcast for electric vehicles. The slight difference is this guy is a boomer. All right, I'm Rick. I'm your host of EV Boomer. I'm living outside northwest Atlanta in Georgia. Don't let my accent fool you, been here a long time. But about 15 months ago, I became a recent EV convert. And I only wish I'd done it a long time before. So by finding this podcast, you might be wondering, where is it going to go? What we're going to do? Well, the cool thing is, being new, no crappy commercials. No commercials at the beginning, or after 2 minutes, or after 15 minutes. If we get more popular, maybe, but right now, no commercials. And of course, targeting, and if you're a boomer, you know it's usually social security scams, erectile dysfunction pills, and cemetery plots. Not necessarily in that order. So no crappy commercials in this podcast. We're going to look about some of the factors in EVs, what made me get what I did, how I got there in the end and the journey, chargeability, what I've seen of the electric vehicle community, advice, not really from me, but I'll give you some great places to go, some websites, some YouTube channels where they've got fantastic advice. And as this podcast grows and matures, hopefully, it might crash and burn after a few episodes, like most of them do, but you just never know. We'll hopefully get some guests and talk about stuff. Whether you're a boomer or you're not a boomer and you're thinking about an EV, this is the journey to begin. I'm definitely the age that when I first learned to drive, it was all manual stick shift, the gear stick. It was manual chokes and power steering. I remember I couldn't afford a car with power steering. And the idea of central locking was actually being able to reach all the doors from the driver's seat with your fingers, pulling the lever out and clicking it as you needed to do. But time went on, power steering came along, manual chokes went away. Oh, that was such a relief. Those cold mornings in the UK particularly, having to start the car, flood the engine, wait a bit, try again, turn it over, distributor caps, coils, all the things that could go wrong, and usually did at midnight on a Sunday night. That was how we grew up. Clunkers. But cars have got more reliable over the years, which has been a great thing. About 15 months plus ago, we were entering one of our teenage daughters going to get her learner's permit, the driving license. And it's like, she needed a car. Well, she can have my old one. Not going to buy a new car for a teenager, just not. So it gave me a chance to start looking at what did I want. I'd been in a few friends' electric vehicles, Teslas and I think a Mustang Mach-E. Loved them. So was I going to go full bore into the EV market? Well, not truthfully sure. Did like the Teslas. I like the minimalistic approach in the Model 3 and the Model Y. So we had a family vacation up on the northwest coast, Seattle. So I rented a Model 3. We get there, and I'm going to probably dedicate an episode to renting electric vehicles because it's not as easy as it should be. We get to the rental place. They say, sorry, no Model 3s. We'll give you a Model Y, which was just as well because the amount of luggage that we had, me, the wife, and 2 kiddos, meant that the Model 3 probably wouldn't have fitted. But the Model Y did. It was like packing Tetris in, but we got it all in. Everything fit nice and square, like a game of Jenga. If one piece came out, the whole lot would tumble, but it didn't. And then I was stuck. How do I get in? What do I do? I was given a credit card size thing. And finally I had to go and get help. And they showed me how to get into the car. That was part one. How do I start the car? Well, you don't. But I pressed the accelerator and nothing happened. Move the forward, reverse. But then I realized I had to have the card in a certain place. But we'll talk about that in another episode of renting. Anyway, drove around Seattle for a few days with the Model Y. Loved it. Took a while getting used to one-pedal driving. So you take your foot off, you expect to coast. No, you and almost got rear-ended on the interstates there, I think I-5. So started to think very seriously about doing that. Well, oddly enough, about 2 months later, I had to head back for business to the West Coast, to Portland, Oregon. So I flew in a day early and rented a Model 3 and drove all the way round to the coast, found a couple of charging in some some cases I did find like what I don't know was a version 2 that looked like it'd come from the early days of Tesla, and clunked it in and sat there for a while admiring the world while the car charged, and then drove around the Oregon coast and all the way back into Portland. I did a lot of miles that day, but I thought, yep, this can work. So got back home and started to make the decision to go electric. Took the new Model 3 for a test drive. I think the Highland, as it was fully out. And I was like, not sure about this. Being older, boomer-esque, and let's just say not exactly as thin as I was in my 20s, I kind of struggled to get in and out a little bit of the Highland. I already had the Model 3 in Oregon and got in and out that fine. And then for me, it was the lack of indicator stalks, the buttons on the wheel. Well, having learned to drive in England, roundabouts and circles are the norm. I'm used to indicating on them, and you will change indicators as you go round and come off. Trying to do that with the steering wheel, all the angles and things, was proving to be a bit of a problem. Thought I could probably get used to that. And then took a Model Y for a test drive. This was the pre-Juniper, the 2024 model. I thought, yeah, this could work. So I thought, that's it, Model Y. Could not make the numbers work. Decided to lease for a couple of years, just try it, and I thought technology's going to move on. Couldn't make the numbers stack up. Now, ironically, if I'd waited about 3 months, I would have made the numbers work brilliantly, but at the time I couldn't. So I thought, you know what, I'll go and take the Model 3 for another test drive. Yep, got in and out, no problem, worked all that out. So I said to it was at the Tesla showrooms just outside Atlanta, I said, if I was to place the order today, when will I get it? And they came back and said, between 2 and 8 weeks. I thought, oh, great. No more specific than that. I was going to order a run-of-the-mill model, nothing fancy. You know, even the base model comes very well equipped. That was it. So I have a Hyundai Sonata. So I thought, been reading about this. The Mach-E's did like. And the Ioniq 5s came in my radar. So the Hyundai dealer was just round the corner. Went there. Got in. Thought, oh, liked it. Took a test drive. And that was it. I was hooked. It felt beautiful. The road beautiful. It had knobs and buttons and things. And this old boomer here could cope with that. And it had, you know, the screens with the navigation on and stuff like that. And it had Apple CarPlay, which I was a great fan of in my Sonata. Thought about it. Next day went, did the paperwork, got a lease at a really good deal. They were throwing these cars off the lot. They really were. And took it away and drove away. That was it. The decision was made. Had I been able to get Tesla in probably less than a week at the time, I would have pulled the trigger and done it that way. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So I went to a traditional dealership, and I took the one for a test drive. That was the one. Came the next day, filled in 100% charge. So there are other factors into all of this. You think, that was it, I got the car. Now I've got to think about charging. The cool thing with the Hyundai at the time, they were giving away 2 years free Electrify America charging. So, you know, the car came to me 100% charged. They did that. And of course, I drove it to and from work and stuff, and I could see the numbers going down. Thought, got to get a charger for the garage. Now, but I got a charge point, ordered that off Amazon. Got to get an electrician. All right. Well, the time all that came in, it was about $1,200. Put it in. I can now charge at home. I then realized that any cost of savings with the electric versus gas or petrol that first year was wiped out really by the cost of the charger and the installation. All right, I can live with that. First year is really break even. Second year onwards is gravy. We're just about at the gravy point now, actually, where, you know, charging at home costs me basically nothing overnight with my power deal. But either way, I'm now finally in the gravy stage, all broke even. Electrify America works very well for me. We've done some trips. By the way, range anxiety and charger anxiety are real. And I'll talk about those in future episodes, particularly we'll do one on chargeability. So long story short, it took about 2 weeks, got the car, got the charger at home. And I remember reading about this at the time, thorough recommendation is if you're going to get an electric vehicle, make sure you can charge where you live. If you're in an apartment block, it might not be as easy. If you live really downtown, townhouse. If you live in, you know, downtown and you're in townhouses or stuff like that, it might not be so easy. But think about that very seriously, because you don't want to be going to charging stations all the time, particularly as deals now with free charging are getting less and less as people are buying more and more EVs at the moment. So think about that, because the price of electrical charging is actually not as cheap as you think per mile, particularly with gas prices being fairly low as I record this episode. To think very closely on that. Can you charge at home? If you can, I think the numbers stack up very well. Right now, the EV credit goes away at the end of September. There's some talk I'm reading that if you put down a deposit, it may still carry on a little bit for that. That'll work its way out. You can check on that on some of the websites. And the dealers hopefully will have clearer guidelines by then. But pick a vehicle you like. So what do you do if you decide you want an electric vehicle? The Tesla vehicle, I think, is a great car. I do like them. Model 3, Model Ys. When my Ioniq lease is up in June next year, I'm going to start thinking very seriously. I already kind of am at what's next. And we'll probably cover that in the podcasts. So I'm not opposed to that. And actually, I'm one of those that does like the Cybertruck. Now, in pictures, it kind of looks weird, but when you see them in real life, it's kind of big, but I think it's kind of cool. And everyone's, it's one of those that really does divide opinion. You either like it or you don't. Now, a couple of guys have got them. They're great dudes. There's nothing untoward about them, and there's some great YouTube channels on that. So where do you go for advice? Well, first of all, I recommend checking out some of the car review websites. There's InsideEVs.com. There's Electrek, ELECTREK.com. I've got reviews. Then things like Car and Driver, Motor Trends have all done that as well. Obviously, a lot of Teslas you're seeing right now on the roads, a lot of Hyundai Ioniq 5s, 6s, which look, I think, pretty cool. There's the Kia EV6s. If you're looking for more of a three-row vehicle, I think there's the Ioniq 9 that's out now, the EV9. And then you get into the higher-end ones, of course. There's, the Porsche Macans and Taycans and stuff like that, or Taycan. Very expensive. Rivians, way above my price point, stuff like that. The Audis, there's some Jaguars. Used, there's some phenomenal deals. Check out the websites. You can get Mercedes-Benz EVs for a lot cheaper than I certainly would have thought. The depreciation on them is fairly high. And there's some obviously lower cost ones as well. But think about ones with good range. Don't worry too much about whether the charge is NACS or whether it's CCS. There's adapters for all of that. And most cars now, not all, most can use the Tesla superchargers, which helps a lot with Ranger anxiety when you're doing longer trips. There are certain myths and truths. For example, they tell you in cold weather your range is a lot less. That's actually quite true. So I live in Atlanta, which is, it's nicknamed Hotlanta for a reason. And I would say in the summer, my journey to and from work in Atlanta is about a 70-mile round trip. And I average about 18 to 20% of the battery. And the range is measured in miles per kilowatt. Which we can talk about a little bit later on when we do chargeability, but I average about 4.3, which I think is pretty good. We had a week when it didn't get above freezing. I would say I'd wake up at 12 degrees Fahrenheit at about 22 by the top of the day, which is quite unusual for Atlanta. I was getting just over half of that. So I was using about 35% or so of the battery at about 2.5 miles to the kilowatt. Then the temperatures warmed up and it was actually fine. So just be prepared for that. If you're in cold climates, it'll work at the end of the day. It works well, because think about Norway. 95% of new cars sold now are electric vehicles. And I happened to be in Norway earlier this year as part of a vacation. And there's still a lot of petrol cars around because they're older and still existing. But there was an awful lot of EVs, and they make it work in cold climates. We're in Iceland for a few days. They had lots of EVs and charging stations all over the world, and I'll cover that in another episode. They make it work. And for them, electricity, by the way, is so cheap because they produce it on the island from natural sources, whereas petrol or gas cost them a fortune. So there's an economic sense for Iceland to run the electric vehicles, and there's a lot of them around. And you can get around the entire island on electric vehicles. They have charging stops all over the place. I think that's one of the things I'd like to do, is go around the island one summer. The midnight sun, and you're just purring down the roads in Iceland, seeing the waterfalls and the scenery. As long as no volcano goes up in smoke, I think that will be fine. So there are lots of reasons, decisions. What about great resources? Search for the models you like on YouTube. There is a phenomenal range of resources. There is a whole set of channels called Out of Spec. They have reviewed, I think, most cars that are available in the UK. They've even gone to China and looked at a lot of those EVs, and some of those are real stunning models. And I've driven an MG in England, which was, it's a British name, but was actually it's now owned by a Chinese company. That was a beautiful car to drive. But there's a ton of EVs around the world. But check out Out of Spec. There's lots of reviews. But also search for the model. There are a lot of owners that will follow them. Like the Ioniq Guy is who I follow because I have a Hyundai Ioniq. And he does some very good videos as he goes through. So check those out. Read the reviews. Take them for a test drive. See how you feel. At the end of the day, you might like the Model 3 because it feels sporty. And I've got to say, zipping around the forest and then the coastal roads in Oregon, I really did enjoy throwing that Model 3 around the corner. It made driving feel great again. I felt like a 18-year-old that had just got your license and was zipping around all of those roads. Then charging. And I'll talk about this in another episode, chargeability. But there's some great episodes. There's a guy called Tom Malogany who does a channel called State of Charge. Go and look at some of his videos because there are some great chargers and not so great chargers. And there's great electrical ways to do things and not so great electrical things. Do everything properly. You'll have a very safe environment. You'll have a great car. And I find it weird now when I take my wife's car and go into a gas station and fill up. Because I'm not used to that. I haven't been in a gas station probably for about 3 weeks. But it feels very, very weird. So that's the first episode of the EV Boomer. I'm Rick. I would love to hear from you. Anything you'd like us to cover. This is brand new. We've no idea which direction this is going to go. I'll talk about my ride with the Ioniq 5 at another time because we've had odd things. I got into a bit of a T-bone accident on the interstate last October. 3 cars got into an argument behind me and unfortunately one got pushed into me. I just heard bang, 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 and then next thing you know, I hear a bang on me. So I lost the car for nearly 3 months while it was at the body shop. Be interesting to see what happens when I hand the lease back, but we'll work all that out, I'm perfectly sure. So I had to drive a nice car, internal combustion engine, for a while. It was a nice car, but I didn't actually like, you press the accelerator, it's like dug, 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 dug. It feels weird when you go back into a nice car. And I've done that with my wife's car. Lights turn green, I press the accelerator, and it's like a rubber band winding up before you go. You press the pedal on an electric car, certainly in my Ioniq, woof, you're gone. Smoking it. Which kind of the odd thing to say when you're a boomer. But, we're all kids at heart, really, isn't it? Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this first one. It's always a bit babbly and rambly. But we'll get going. Hopefully, as this progresses, we'll get some interviews with people in the EV industry. But do check out those websites, as I mentioned, or YouTube videos, Out of Spec, State of Charge. And we'll talk about more as I find them. But anyway, thank you. Love to hear from you. Rick@evboomer.com is how you can find me on email. And check out ultimately evboomer.com. You can sign up and get notified when we release new podcasts. Until next time, stay safe and keep driving.